There's an arm race taking place in the NFC West. The Seahawks and 49ers both making big moves before the NFL trade deadline. Does Leonard Williams put the Seahawks over the top as the favorites, or is Chase Young going to keep the 49ers in the driver's seat? We're going to be breaking it all down in our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined for our Tuesday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there, whether you are listening in Moscow, Idaho, or Jacksonville, Florida. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The NFL trade deadline has come and gone. The Seahawks didn't make any more moves today. I know fans are really excited when I decided to go for a run this morning, thinking that might spur John Schneider to make another trade. But unfortunately, the magic did not strike 2 days in a row. So we don't have any new trades to break down for the Seahawks, but there was a big trade in the NFC West. We're going to be looking at how these moves set up the division heading into the second half of the season. We'll have Tell the Truth Tuesday, as always, and we'll pull back the curtain, taking a first look at a very good Baltimore Ravens team heading into Seattle's road matchup here in Week 9. This episode is brought your way by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's a $150 winnings if your team is victorious. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It feels like 2013 and 2014 all over again. The two-team arms race, the NFC West, the Seahawks and the 49ers, both making big splashes to add to their defensive lines in the 24 hours leading up to the trade deadline. Of course, Leonard Williams coming over from New York to bolster the Seahawks' interior defensive line. And the 49ers today adding former top 5 pick Chase Young, trading just a third-round pick to the Commanders to acquire him and reunite him with Nick Bosa on that already loaded defensive line. And obviously, Rob, the landscape has changed significantly with these two trades. The top two teams are trying to outgun each other, particularly with defensive linemen. And now that creates the real fun storyline here. Which team is now the favorite in the division? The Seahawks ahead by half a game heading into Week 9. Both teams adding to their defensive arsenal and now looking to go into the stretch run. It's going to be interesting to see which one of these moves ends up working out best for these two teams.
Well, I think that both moves are going to wind up working out very well for these two clubs. I just don't know that the Seahawks have narrowed the gap enough, at least on paper. I am very excited to see these two teams face off on Thanksgiving. Here we are joining everybody on Halloween. We got to wait for another big holiday before we actually get a little bit of kind of proof to see which of these trades and which of the rest of the teams, the rest of the rosters for those teams actually can win this slugfest that this game is going to wind up becoming, or this race, I guess I should say, in the NFC West is becoming. I think that, again, both teams, I think, absolutely swung for the fences and made very intelligent moves. I think that the Seahawks, if you, in terms of trying to kind of compare the two different teams, I think that the Seahawks have narrowed the gap, even with the 49ers trade for Chase Young. And the reason why I say that, Corbin, is because I think the Seahawks and their ability to block on the edge, Geno Smith's ability to step up in the pocket, I think that was demonstrated yet again with their victory over the Cleveland Browns and the best pass rusher on the planet, at least in my opinion, in Myles Garrett, a very quality edge rusher, Zadarian Smith, Okonkwo off the other side as well. I thought that the Seahawks, again, just kind of demonstrated they do have the ability to protect on the edges, whereas the 49ers, on the other hand, have very much struggled to protect right up the middle. And so, again, I do think that the Seahawks have made a step forward, but similar to when you see that in an NFL game or any football game, it seems like on television anymore, when you see a call made on the field and then they do the review, I always go with the call on the field. To me, at this point, to kind of continue that analogy, the call on the field at this point is the San Francisco 49ers are the defending NFC West champions. Until the Seahawks or anybody else can knock them off that pedestal, I still believe that the 49ers should be the higher rated team at this point in the NFC West.
I probably would have said that the 49ers are still the favorite even before they made the trade for Chase Young. And I've got a little bit different opinion on that trade than what a lot of people do. Is it going to help the 49ers? Absolutely. Do I think that they got really good value potentially putting him back with Nick Bosa? Yeah, third-round pick for a player of his talent, that's trading away peanuts. At the same time, I feel like the secondary, the cornerback position in particular, that is the area that the 49ers have had the biggest struggles on defense to this point, and they didn't make any moves to improve that. So they are putting all of their poker chips in the corner, wanting that defensive line that's already an elite defensive line. They're hoping they can take it up another notch with Chase Young to help that secondary just make it to the point. It doesn't matter that we don't have guys that are elite cover corners because teams don't have time to throw the football anyway. So they're taking a little bit of a gamble there as far as I'm concerned, because this is the former economics teacher in me speaking. As far as opportunity cost goes, the 49ers already have an elite defensive line. How much better is it going to get? To me, it's a diminishing return when you're talking about adding somebody to a unit that's already arguably the best in the NFL in terms of defensive line. So again, I'm not dismissing the idea you're adding another talented player. It just feels like the 49ers probably would have helped themselves out more if they could have gone out and gotten help in the secondary at the quarterback position. Chase Young is going to be a nice addition for them, but again, I don't know how much that really moves the needle because they're already so good at rushing the passer. I don't know how much better that they can get bringing in another player. Whereas with Leonard Williams and the Seahawks, this still is an area where, at least from a depth perspective, we talked about this yesterday, if Jaron Reed or Draymond Jones or Mario Edwards goes down with an injury, there's very little depth at that position right now. You now have the flexibility where Leonard Williams can play 55, 60% of the snaps, which is going to be a major reduction compared to what he played in New York. He's going to be able to stay fresh, and I think that's going to improve his pass rushing production, and it's going to take some of the load off of all the other guys. Seattle's going to be able to rotate all those players in, and depth suddenly becomes a strength along with having some elite talent at the top of that depth chart as well. So I think it closes the gap with the 49ers, but I'm still going to say that the 49ers are the favorite, but I think it is a very slim margin at this point. I think the Seahawks have clearly made up ground on them, and I still think, based on what I've seen the last few weeks, if Geno Smith can find a way to eliminate a few of the mistakes that he's been making every single game and play a little bit cleaner, I still trust him more than I do Brock Purdy. And I think these two teams are much closer than last year. That could be the equalizer. So I guess the bottom line is I'm really excited to see these two teams play twice coming up here in the next month and a half, because I have a feeling that they are going to be slugfests that are further enhanced by the additions that were made here at the deadline by both teams.
Oh, no question about it. Very, very excited to see those two, those two matchups. And one of the things I think that, kind of bounce off of what you were just saying there, I think the 49ers just turned what was a strength into a super strength. In terms of their pass rush, because similar to the point that you were making there about how Leonard Williams is going to be able to just enhance say Nick Bosa, for example. Nick Bosa hasn't been the Nick Bosa that we've seen of prior years. He has been very good for the 49ers, but not absolutely dominant. And I think that the reuniting him with Chase Young, that's a cute little storyline as far as the Ohio State ties. I think just the fact that you have a legitimately formidable pass rusher on the other side, I think that in itself is going to help the 49ers. But I think that you made an excellent point about the fact that from a defensive standpoint, one of the areas of concern for the 49ers has been the lack of stellar play at cornerback. There, at least based on some media reports, there was a report that the 49ers tried to swing a trade for the cornerback Adoree Jackson from the New York Giants. I think that could have enhanced their club. And when I watched the 49ers on tape, Corbin, we talked about this in yesterday's show, I see a significant drop-off between Trent Williams, their future Hall of Fame left tackle, and the bevy of different candidates that they have played at the left tackle as well as right tackle positions. Of course, they lost their right tackle a year ago. Mike McGlinchey signed a big deal with the Denver Broncos, and the 49ers have struggled in pass protection on the edges there. So again, they made their defense, their pass rush much better with the addition of Chase Young, assuming that he stays healthy, which is not something that he has done very well since he joined the NFL. But I wonder if the 49ers wouldn't have actually made their team better, made their team deeper if they had tried to add some talent along the offensive line or, again, in the secondary.
Yeah, this feels like one of those cases where they didn't necessarily attack the deficiencies on their roster. They just doubled down, as you said, going from a strength to a super strength, which you can win NFL games with that. But we've also seen teams that have had that blow up in their face because they didn't find a way to mask some of the major deficiencies that they had. And the 49ers, for starting off 5-0, they've lost 3 straight. They have clearly shown some warts here the last couple of games. And so we'll see what happens, how much that Chase Young addition helps the 49ers. But I am confident that Leonard Williams is going to make a big difference for the Seahawks coming to the Pacific Northwest. Up next, it's Tell the Truth Tuesday. We're going to dish out some words of wisdom coming out of Sunday's win over the Browns and maybe just in general takeaways here as we are kind of at the midway point with a 17-game schedule. You can't have a clear 50-50 split, but we are close enough to that midway point. We're going to be getting into those Tell the Truth Tuesday wisdom bits coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks, which is brought your way by our friends over at DoorDash. Why root for your team on an empty stomach? That is a game day travesty that ensures you won't be cheering at your very best, and nobody wants that on Sunday or Monday night. Order on DoorDash and save on football watch party favorites. You can get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order by using the code LOCKED23 on the DoorDash app. When I'm kicking back and watching the game with friends and family, I love to order Jet City Pizza. It's my favorite gluten-free pizza place. I swear by it. In the Seattle region, got to have a 2-liter of root beer to go with it as well. And DoorDash makes the process easy, so I don't have to leave the comfort of my couch for delicious, great-tasting food before and after kickoff. It's so simple. I've ordered Jet City constantly off DoorDash, and their owners know me by name. Ready to satisfy your taste buds on game day? Quench those cravings with your favorite local restaurants via DoorDash. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order, and download the DoorDash app. Enter in the code LOCK23. Subject to change. Terms apply. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Don't forget tomorrow, our favorite episode of the week, Matchup Wednesday, Ravens, Seahawks, 2 teams that have won 5 and 6 games respectively, the top of their divisions, teams that are contenders in both conferences. This is going to be a fun one in Baltimore. We will be looking at the key positional battles to watch on both sides of the football. You won't want to miss it. It's Tell the Truth Tuesday, and maybe today we should call it Tackle Tuesday, Rob, because you and I were preparing for the show, and we were on the same tangent coming out of this game on Sunday, and I gave the game ball on our post-game show to the offensive line, but after watching the All-22, I might want to change that up and just, I don't want to say I take the game balls away from the guards in the center, but the tackles, they were the story of this football game with Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith on the other side. I felt like the tackles were critical to Seattle winning this football game. And there's several different stories that you can take away from that, the players that are playing and the one that it looks like might not play at all the remainder of the season.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Abraham Lucas, and because we do have some concerns about whether or not that he is going to be back on the field for the Seahawks. But I'll kind of take the positive spin here for a moment. As you said, you gave basically the game ball to the offensive line, and after further review, especially wanted to acknowledge the offensive tackles. Pete Carroll did the exact same thing in his post-game press conference and certainly in some of his media appearances following this victory over the Cleveland Browns. I want to kind of shine the spotlight for a moment on the right tackle position where it was Stone Forsythe and then the veteran Jason Peters who were kind of alternating snaps or alternating drives, I guess I should say. And I have been as critical of Stone Forsythe as I believe anybody has, but I have to give him some credit. He was spectacular, especially in the running game, which really surprised me. One of the areas in which that he excelled at the University of Florida was you're just a big, big man with light feet. He was able to do very well in pass protection, but as a very tall man, he struggled with leverage. But Corbin, he was spectacular in the running game. Both of the Seahawks' longest runs, one from Kenneth Walker III, the other from Zach Charbonnet, one in the first quarter, one in the fourth quarter. Both were the result of terrific blocks by Stone Forsythe. The touchdown to Jake Bobo was another key block by Stone Forsythe. Now, there were some moments in pass protection in which he excelled. There were some moments in which he struggled. Both of the interceptions that Geno Smith through in this game, Stone Forsythe surrendered at least what I would consider to be a pressure if others don't. And they came against Darius Smith and one against Oyo Okoronkwo, a guy whose name I always butcher, and so I apologize. But the point is the Stone Forsythe played very well. Jason Peters also made some splashes. But for a man as big as he is, and I'm guessing he's got to be right around 350 pounds, it was the quickness that he demonstrated. He also struggled a little bit in pass protection. That almost pick six that Geno Smith threw, that was due to one of the worst pass protection reps that I saw from anybody on the Seahawks offensive line. I believe that it was Zadarius Smith that got Jason Peters on that particular snap. It was a nice little inside counter kind of move in which basically Peters whiffed. You don't see the veteran whiff very often, but he did in that particular case. To me, what was most encouraging about this, though, Corbin, we talked about this in yesterday's show, is the fact that the Seahawks had two legitimate right tackles able to play. The fact that neither of them are Abraham Lucas, to me, is again a testament to the development and the depth that the Seahawks are building along the offensive line, which for so long had been one of the obvious Achilles heels of this club.
And they should be thanking their lucky stars that they have that kind of depth in that position, because we know Jake Curhan started a few games over at right tackle as well, and he can play there in a pinch. But Forsythe, that was the best I have seen him play in the NFL. The 47-yard run that Ken Walker III had, the block that really sprung him on the cutback was Forsythe, who did an inside reach block, and then he hooked Dalvin Tomlinson outside. And we talked about how strong and how powerful Dalvin Tomlinson is. That was probably the best block that I have seen Stone Forsythe make. So you see him out there. I thought Peters, yeah, he had that one miss on that near interception on that final drive, but he also had a couple really nice pass protection reps against Myles Garrett that helped Geno Smith lead the team downfield for that game-winning touchdown. I thought both guys played at a very high level, both in pass protection and run blocking. And what it really paints the picture for is that the Seahawks, they've been doing this since Abe Lucas went down in week 1. They have been bracing for the possibility that he wasn't going to be back till late in the season, or dare I say, not return for the entire rest of the season. And I'm worried that that's where we are trending right now. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think that there is a strong possibility. The fact that Pete Carroll yesterday said that he is still dealing with discomfort in that knee, that he had an injection in. He has said that it's not an injury per se, which coach speak wise, that tells me is there something chronic going on there that they're trying to deal with non-surgical procedures. And he's not bounced back the way that they thought he was going to. And so it's very concerning to me. But if you're looking for a silver lining, Forsythe's playing well. Jason Peters now is back in shape. He's ready to go. And Jake Curhan can play that position. They have better depth than they have had in a long time to be able to withstand that. To make a run, you'd think having Abe Lucas out there is going to give you your best chance to do that. But right now, I think the Seahawks, they are doing everything they can to move forward, knowing that there is a chance that they won't have Abraham Lucas for the rest of the season. I think that that is a reality that is being felt in that building. If they get him back at some point, that's excellent news. But the ominous update from Pete Carroll yesterday, it was pretty bleak sounding to me. And I think that the Seahawks could be without Lucas, and there's a good chance they could be without him for the rest of this season. As far as the defensive side of the football, I feel like I talk about this guy every other show, and I just continue to heap more praise on him. But this is what happens when you play at an all-pro level, and it is not hyperbole anymore. I know a few weeks ago when I kind of threw the idea that Boye Mafe was an all-pro player, you kind of gave me a little bit of an odd stare. But I think at this point, it is not hyperbole with the way he's playing. 5 consecutive games with a sack. He recovered a fumble in this game. And if you go back and you watch the tape, his run defense was phenomenal from start to finish in this game. He had a couple plays. He set the edge and made the running back bounce outside and gobbled him up. He had a couple times he took blocks head on, threw the blocker off to the side, and then made the tackle on the line of scrimmage. He is just turning into a dominant all-around outside linebacker defensive end in this defense, and it has been a privilege to watch. So he might not get into all-pro consideration, but I think he absolutely deserves to with the pass rush win rate numbers, the pressure numbers, the sacks. He is putting the tangible production out there on top of the film, just being flat out impressive.
It has been very impressive. I have to absolutely acknowledge that. I think that it's a lot easier to be a pass rusher when you have an elite secondary behind him. But when he is also playing the run as well as Boye Mafe, that to me is what I'm excited about. Now, he had demonstrated that last year, but he's become even better in that area and obviously has grown by leaps and bounds as a pass rusher so far this season. So, yes, he is making a strong case for all-pro consideration. I can tell you he's making a very strong case for Defensive Rookie of the Year consideration, and that being Devin Witherspoon. I mean, I was watching his tape against the Cleveland Browns this week, and obviously he didn't have the really splashy plays that we've seen previously. So I wanted to see what the Browns were doing to try to avoid him. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. Witherspoon was playing a lot at the left cornerback spot, but he also slid inside to play the nickel spot. And sometimes it was the left nickel spot, sometimes it was the right nickel spot. Sometimes the Browns would not have a wide receiver on his side of the field at all, and so he would creep up to the line of scrimmage almost like a safety or a linebacker, kind of similar to what we just talked about with Boye Mafe. To me, when you're seeing a cornerback who is playing the run as well as Witherspoon is, as a rookie with the limited experience that he has, we all know that he didn't play a lot of high school football. That, to me, is one of the things that is most encouraging about him. As excited as I was about Reek Woolen, then known as Tariq Woolen, a year ago, and all of the splashy interception, there were still some times where he would get beat in run defense. But watching Witherspoon and his willingness to take on blockers basically at the hole, ride them upfield, and force running backs to cut back inside where the rest of the Seahawks posse is waiting there to kind of gobble up running backs. To me, that again shows the instincts that Pete Carroll has kind of talked about and showing what a complete player that Devin Witherspoon is. We know that Pete Carroll has really been against the idea of moving corners to shadow wide receivers. That's exactly what the Seahawks are doing at times with Witherspoon. And to me, that just makes the Seahawks secondary the most formidable, perhaps, in all of the NFL.
Yeah, and I mentioned this last week. I think that Devin Witherspoon, you can already make an argument that he is the best player on Seattle's defense as a rookie. He has been that impactful. And watching the way the Browns game plan to avoid him like the plague, that clearly shows the respect that Kevin Stefanski and his staff had for number 21. With that being said, best player and most indispensable are not always the same guy. And coming out of this game, Jamal Adams, the Seahawks are still keeping him on a little bit of a pitch count. They had a few drives where he wasn't in the game. And what do you know? The Cleveland Browns drove right down the field and put points on the board when he was not out there. So I'm going to make the argument. Jamal Adams, to me, may be the most indispensable defensive player in Seattle's roster. And I think one of the reasons they had inconsistency issues throughout last year is they didn't have number 33 out there. And it's not because I'm expecting every game that he's going to make a pass deflection with his helmet or anything like that. But this guy he does things that no other safety can do. And it complements the rest of this secondary. It complements the linebackers and just the energy that he brings to the equation. Devin Witherspoon has a similar mentality, but Jamal Adams is on another level, and the entire team feeds off him. When he's on the sideline wearing a beanie, that is lost out there, and you can just see it. It almost feels like the defense is deflated a little bit, not having him out there. And so we've seen the impact. He maybe hasn't had the splashy plays, But this defense just as a whole plays much better when he's out there. And he had several plays where he had really good coverage downfield in this football game that aren't going to show up in a box score. But if you watch the all 22, he was impressive. So Adams has been great coming back from this injury. He's exceeded my expectations, and I think he's just going to keep getting better as he gets more snaps under his belt. But you can just see the negative effect when he is not out there and how positive of a factor that he is for this entire defense when he is on the field.
No question about it. I mean, he is a difference maker. That's the easiest way to put it for a guy that can do as many different things as Jamal Adams can. It's funny. In a very similar way, I think that Geno Smith is proving himself to be a difference maker. And it's kind of funny because you hear people criticize the quarterback. They obviously get so much credit when things are going right, and when things are going bad, everybody wants to blame the quarterback. And so I went back and I really watched, the tape on Geno Smith's 2 interceptions, as well as the 2 turnover-worthy plays, that I thought that he threw. The one that was almost a pick six, so we referenced that before, where it was a Quanqua. I apologize. I said it was Azarius Smith that beat Jason Pierce, that inside move. Got my notes here, and it was Oyo Okoronkwo. And then the other play where DK Metcalf, where Geno Smith towards the end of the game kind of squirted out to the right and threw a ball that towards DK Metcalf was very well covered by Denzel Ward. I thought that was a mistake on Geno Smith's part. But on the 2 interceptions, one that was intended for DK Metcalf and one that was, thrown for towards Noah Fant, that was tipped by Maurice Hurst, and then he makes the interception. On both of those plays, there was pressure in his face. I want to say that for the first part. The second thing is, as far as the interceptions, I thought that there was a weak route, on a quick out by DK Metcalf. I want to give Metcalf credit. As we've talked about before, that he was sick in this football game. He made some spectacular blocks. 14 different times the Seahawks targeted him. On this particular route, though, if you were watching it, he basically kind of very much leans into his route. Any quarterback with his salt playing man-to-man coverage is going to break on that, jump in front of it, and that's exactly what happened. On the other one, it was actually intended for Jackson Smith-Njigba. I misspoke a moment ago. But on that particular route, JSN basically stopped his route. There was just a clear miscommunication there between a veteran quarterback, a rookie wide receiver. You take a wild guess of which one was off on that particular play. And so, again, criticize Geno Smith for all you want. There are definitely some throws in this football game that he just was not as accurate as he normally is. But the 2 critical interceptions that he actually threw in this football game, I think that was as much an indication of just poor route running by the Seahawks wide receivers, leaving their quarterback out to dry a little bit more than the quarterback throwing inaccurate passes or making poor decisions with the football.
Geno Smith's going to be looking to bounce back this week. Maybe no interceptions, but he's going to be going up against a very good Baltimore Ravens defense. We're going to be looking behind the curtain, our first look at Baltimore, what to expect on offense and defense from the 6-2 Ravens. We'll get to that here in a moment on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks, which is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready for Week 9 in the NFL with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including finding out the spread for Seahawks Ravens in Baltimore this weekend, player props such as Devin Witherspoon's Rookie of the Year odds, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and enjoy the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Don't forget, tomorrow, Matchup Wednesday, all the key positional battles, offense, defense, Seahawks, Ravens. Going to be a really fun show. Make sure that you are listening in on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. The Seahawks will be traveling to Baltimore this weekend to take on the surging Ravens. They've been playing really good football as of late. They're now 6-2, sitting atop the AFC North, which currently would have 3 playoff teams. So it's a division that's doing quite well as a whole, Baltimore is at the top. Lamar Jackson is having a phenomenal season with his new offensive coordinator, really maximizing his skills. The receivers that have been added around him, rookie Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham Jr. He's still got tight end Mark Andrews, a run game with Gus Edwards as the lead train as of late that's been very physical. Their offensive line is a solid group. Rob, this could be one of the 2 or 3 favorites in the AFC to make the Super Bowl this year. That super deep conference, that is how well Baltimore is playing right now on both sides of the football. But the offense has really been the difference with the change of offensive coordinators and really bringing the most out of Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, no question about it. As far as this being a possible dark horse Super Bowl preview, I think that the Seahawks and the Baltimore Ravens are probably not considered by very many people in the media to be the favorites, but I think that both of them have a legitimate path to the Super Bowl. And so this is a game I'm super excited about. I love that you mentioned the offensive coordinator. So Todd Monken is the offensive coordinator. This is his first year with the Baltimore Ravens. He had previously been the last couple of years at the University of Georgia, helping the Georgia Bulldogs win a couple of national championships. And, when he came in, Corbin, then there was all this talk that Lamar Jackson was going to take his game to a whole other stratosphere as a passer. In a way, he has. He's now completing a career high 70% of his passes. He had never done that in his NFL career, never higher than, say, 65%. At the same time, over the first 8 games so far this season, he's got 9 touchdown passes. The Baltimore Ravens currently rank second in rushing yards, second in rushing touchdowns, and first in rushing first downs. So, they are just second in rushing first downs as well, behind only the Philadelphia Eagles. So, again, this remains a team that is very much built on running the football, like a lot of the teams in the NFC North. And that's, the recipe for success in the NFL. Pete Carroll's been preaching it for quite some time here. So, I think what's interesting about this is the fact that Todd Monken comes in as the offensive coordinator. He is one of the huge additions. You mentioned the wide receivers. Zay Flowers, the rookie, actually leads the Ravens in touchdown or in reception so far this season. So there definitely have been some additions on offense, but in a lot of ways, this is kind of one of those examples of a team that basically says they're going to make some changes, and yet still John Harbaugh's Baltimore Ravens are going to continue to do what they do, and that is run the football with Lamar Jackson and whoever is the running back. As you said, it's Gus Edwards leading that train right now, but they've used other running backs in the past. It's Lamar Jackson, his legs. He's got 5 touchdowns on the ground as well as those 9 touchdowns through the air. It's stopping the Baltimore Ravens in the running game. And then, them, of course, playing great defense on the other side of the ball as well.
Yeah, the Ravens are still a run-heavy team. They run as much 21 personnel as any team in the league. They like to have 2 backs in the field, whether they're in shotgun, pistol, under center. They still run a high percentage of their plays in shotgun, but they do a lot of that with 2 backs in the backfield because they do run option. They run a lot of design quarterback plays. But the thing that I've noticed with this team where Todd Monken has really made the difference is the explosive plays. If you're looking at 10-yard or more runs and 20-plus yard passes, the Ravens are second in the NFL for combined explosives this year. So this is an offense that isn't just doing 3 yards and bringing up a pile of dust like they were some of the years where they had their last offensive coordinator running the show. They are letting the ball go downfield. They're airing it out some. They're getting the explosives in the run game. So I do think Todd Monken has made a huge difference for Lamar Jackson. And, of course, the receivers they've added. Zay Flowers have been excellent as a rookie. Beckham, when he's been healthy, has given them a bit of a lift. You put those 2 out there with Mark Andrews, who's one of the best tight ends in football. The offensive line that they have is always stout, always does well run blocking and pass protecting. But I think the big difference for this team is clearly the explosives. This is a team that can take the top off of a defense, both in the run game and in the passing game. They've been doing it all season, and they know how to finish drives too. They're a very good red zone team with that run attack that they have. And Lamar Jackson, don't kid yourself. Maybe the Ravens have cut a little bit back on the design runs, but he's still leading all quarterbacks in the NFL by a wide margin in rushing yards and averaging 5 yards per carry. So that is still going to be a big part of Baltimore's offense. And any offensive coordinator that comes in that tries to take that away, you shouldn't be an offensive coordinator, because that is a unique strength that he brings to the table. But they've really accentuated his strengths as a passer by adding more talent at the receiver position, and quite frankly, just having a more modernized offense with Todd Monken as the OC. The Ravens, to me, though, are still about defense. This is the black and blue division. John Harbaugh is a special teams guy, but he always has great defenses. That is a main focus for him ever since he became the head coach all those years ago. And this might be the best defense that he has had since Ray Lewis and Ed Reed were roaming on Baltimore's defense. You look at the stats right now, Rob. They're first in the NFL in sacks. They are in the top 3 in quarterback hits. They are in the top 4 in tackles for loss. So you want to talk about an extremely disruptive team, not just their front line. They will bring their linebackers. They'll bring their safeties, their corners, their secondary, all those guys. You want to play for Baltimore, you better be willing to come up and hit people. That is a prerequisite if you want to play defensively for John Harbaugh's team. And you can see that personality. This is a defense that's been coming on as of late. They don't give up very many explosive plays, and they're extremely disruptive, getting those plays in the backfield to put offenses off schedule. That is going to be a big key for the Seahawks to watch this week. Can you eliminate those plays and not let them get you off track?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's so many fun statistics out there that people will point to, and I'm a simpleton here. But to me, the most important statistic out there, other than the one loss record, is just how many points per game are you allowing? And the Ravens rank first in that one. They're allowing only 15.1 points per game. They have yet to allow as many as 25 points in a single contest so far, Corbin. I mean, they've only allowed 6 touchdowns over those 8 games. And by the way, they have 8 interceptions over those 8 games. Doesn't take a real mathematician to figure out that average. So they've been absolutely dominant. And, the first round pick a couple of years ago in Kyle Hamilton, the big safety out of Notre Dame, they made the big splashy move to bring in the free agent from the New Orleans Saints, Marcus Williams. And yet it's a guy named Geno Stone who actually leads the Ravens. He's got 5 of those 8 interceptions for them so far. He's an opportunistic free safety with terrific instincts and great ball skills. So again, this is a team that, as you mentioned, the pass rush is absolutely spectacular. They have playmakers in the back half as well. By the way, they made the trade, of course, for Roquan Smith, the inside linebacker, a couple of years ago. Last year. So again, this Ravens defense is terrific. It's very similar in a lot of ways to the Cleveland Browns defense that the Seahawks, of course, just beat. But one of the things that we talked about with the Browns is it basically was Myles Garrett and everybody else. There is no one superstar for the Baltimore Ravens. They're a little bit like the Seahawks in that way. And you can't try and just stop one guy. They have several great players.
Yeah, that's what they have done. They have built a defense that doesn't necessarily have a superstar, but they have a lot of really good players. They've got some good young players like Patrick Queen in the middle that they've been developing, and then bringing in a player like Roquan Smith. That has been a game changer for this defense. And he is proof that having a great middle linebacker can be a real difference maker for your defense. And what's interesting is historically, the Ravens have been one of the teams that you expect to bring pressure the most. Year after year, they're usually in the top 5 in blitz percentage. They're 16th right now. So they will still bring some pressure, but they're getting the sacks and tackle for loss with a lot more 4-man rushes than what we have seen from them in years past. Their defensive line has been very stout up to this point, and getting a healthy Michael Pierce back has certainly helped with that. You want to talk about another mountain of a man. He's not as tall as Dalvin Tomlinson, but he is wide, and he is powerful, and he is explosive for a man of his size. And that has really helped the Ravens rebound in the middle. They got a couple really athletic defensive linemen as well. Justin Matabuke was a player that we talked about coming out of Texas A&M that is going to give the Seahawks some problems. He is more of an athletic pass rushing type, but this is going to be a football team it's going to be a tough task for Seattle's offensive line, because they don't have Myles Garrett, but they have a lot of really good players, and their secondary and linebackers, they're third in the NFL in pass breakups this year. So they get their hands on the football, not just for turnovers, but they get a lot of pass breakups. Those lead to turnovers. It's just a very active, aggressive defense, which we've typically seen from the Baltimore Ravens, and that'll create an interesting challenge for the Seahawks in Week 9. You can follow me on Twitter, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to ensure you don't miss a single episode. Tomorrow, we will be diving into all the key matchups, the positional battles to watch. Ravens versus Seahawks in Baltimore. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for listening in and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.